Hello and welcome back to Live from Paris. It's time now for all today's business news, and for that I'm joined by William Edwards. Good morning.
Hi, Lorna.
So we're going to start off with a look at the markets.
The previous session in the US was pretty mixed. Let's take a look how things are going in Asia at the moment. It's the Hang Seng that's been lagging behind, actually. You can see they're still down just about lightly. Goldman Sachs has announced it is selling a $1 billion stake in China's industrial and commercial bank, the biggest lender in China, so that has really dragged things down there on the Hong Kong market. Meanwhile, let's take a look at how things were in the US in that session, and a mixed picture there. The Nasdaq up, helped by good results from Yahoo. Search advertising revenue was up by 14% from them. Really quite a bit of a bounce back for that company, which has really been having some trouble recently. Even though the other two markets are in the red, though, let's take a look at the S&P 500 in particular. You can see this is over the course of the last year, and we're hitting new highs again. Actually, it's at its best level since 2007. So things are going pretty well on the US markets at the moment.
Going well on the US markets, and car firms doing particularly well.
Yes, particularly Asian car firms, actually. We had results out on Monday from Toyota, Nissan and Honda, and Toyota has gone back into #1 in the world's global car producers, leapfrogged both Volkswagen and General Motors, which was previously #1 in 2011. Of course, Toyota itself was hit not only by the Japanese earthquake and tsunami in 2011, but also by reliability issues in the United States. There are a number of recalls. Now it has taken its #1 position. Also, Nissan and Honda saw record sales as well.
Okay, but not all looking up for the car industry, especially here in France.
No, in particular in France, actually, because French manufacturers are focused so much on the European market rather than more globalized. French manufacturers have been seeing falling sales for the last couple of years now. And Renault, in particular, is trying to cut its costs as it battles overcapacity and plummeting sales. It's having more meetings with unions starting today. It's had a series of negotiations to try and cut those costs, but unions have accused them of blackmail, among other things, by saying that the company is said it's going to close a factory if there is no satisfactory conclusion to these negotiations. Meanwhile, at Peugeot Citroën, things are even worse. If anything, the factory of Aulnay is set to be shut down, and cameras have been let in for the first time. Let's take a look. It's not looking pretty.
Slamming the brakes on production, hundreds of striking auto workers flooded this Peugeot Citroën plant.
Production has been paralyzed. Who wants to continue the strike?
France's largest automaker is cutting 8,000 jobs and plans to shut this factory next year.
We are going to talk to our colleagues who are working, and we will try to convince them to join the strike, because it is the only way to stop Peugeot.
Caught in a standoff, the company responded by sending 200 employees from across the country, reinforcements to oversee the strike and make sure the situation remained calm.
At the moment, we are making sure everything is fine, but we don't feel very useful. We are watching things, waiting.
Strikers said it was intimidation, but the car maker claimed it was only trying to protect those who wanted to work and its equipment. Earlier in the week, Peugeot released these images documenting vandalism, but on the 11th day of the strike, production finally resumed. The atmosphere remains tense at Aulnay-sous-Bois. Strikers heckled people returning to work. Fears that the assembly line is on its last legs.
Right, well, we're moving on now to Italy, William, because there's a crisis there at the country's oldest lender, and they've had to draw in the head of the European Central Bank.
Yeah, the Monte di Pasco Bank, the oldest bank in the world, actually, has been in crisis for the last week or so. We were talking about it a bit yesterday, but the new development is that Mario Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, he made an unannounced visit to Milan yesterday for a meeting with Italy's finance minister, because this has really become a national issue in Italy. In fact, the bank has had to be bailed out with 3.9 billion euros by the Italian government. Obviously, a very touchy issue with Mario Monti, the Prime Minister, facing re-election prospects just next month. At the heart of the issue is a purchase of a smaller bank a few years ago, which was said to be at a highly inflated price when Mario Draghi of the European Central Bank was in charge of the Italian Central Bank.
Oh, not good news there. Well, moving on now to Iceland, which you may remember suffered a spectacular banking crash during the financial crisis. Many foreign investors lost their money as a result of that, including people from the UK and the Netherlands. They wanted Iceland to pay up and compensate them for their losses, but in a controversial court case, things didn't go their way. Luke Brown has more.
A ruling in favour of the Icelandic state. The Court of the European Free Trade Association decided that Reykjavik was right not to use taxpayers' money to pay for a private bank's losses. The Icelandic government hailed the decision, saying it was no longer a block to Iceland's economic recovery.
I'm sure this will have a very positive impact for Iceland. It's quite clear that this will reinforce the rebuilding in Iceland, and perhaps the rating agencies will revise their outlook on us.
The case dates back to the 2008 financial crisis when Iceland's three largest banks collapsed. One of the biggest victims, Landsbanki, taking its online branch iSave down too. Hundreds of thousands of iSave online depositors in Britain and the Netherlands saw their deposits frozen. The Dutch and British states forked out €3.9 billion to cover those losses, but they demanded Iceland pick up the tab.
We are taking legal action against the Icelandic authorities to recover the money lost to people who deposited in UK branches of its banks.
In spite of that, protests, petitions and two decisive referenda left little doubt. Iceland wouldn't be using taxpayers' money to repay foreign savers. Britain and the Netherlands claimed that was unfair. But the EFTA's ruling on Monday disagreed, as existing legislation wasn't designed for a systemic bank failure of the magnitude experienced in Iceland. All is not lost, though. Landsbanki's liquidators have already repaid over half of the losses and expects to complete its task in 3 years' time.
Luke Brown there. And finally, William, it seems that Rome is turning to a handbag company to help finance its architectural heritage.
Yeah, actually, they're turning to anyone who will pay. And in this case, it is Fendi, the firm famous for its handbags, amongst other things. They're paying €2 million, €2 million euros, I should say, to do up the Trevi fountain in the centre of Rome. Not the first time this has happened. It's been quite a series of developments. €25 million was given by Todd's Shoes to do up the Colosseum a few years ago.
Wow. Architectural heritage sponsored by Fendi. Thank you very much indeed, William, for that. The international weather is coming up next. Then Stuart Norval will be here with the headlines, so do stay tuned.